The monitor's steady mechanical beep was the soundtrack to the last 15 years of my life. It was a sound I'd come to hate, a constant reminder of my duty, my cage. I adjusted the blanket over my mother-in-law, Eleanor Vance, her frail body barely making a dent in the hospital bed we'd installed in the living room. For 15 years I had been her primary caretaker. I bathed her, fed her, read to her, and endured her increasingly bitter and demanding nature. All while supporting my husband Alistair as he climbed the academic ladder from a small-town college instructor to a celebrated professor of literature. "You are the backbone of this family, Clara," people would tell me. "A saint." Alistair would echo the sentiment, his hand on my shoulder, his eyes full of a performative gratitude that, in my youthful naivety, I mistook for love. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, my love. Once I'm tenured, I'll make it all up to you." I believed him. I had given him my inheritance to fund his research, abandoned my own acceptance into the prestigious Rosewood Academy of Art, and followed him to this sleepy town. I managed our household, navigated the complex social politics of the university with his colleagues, and meticulously polished his public image. I was the invisible hand guiding his success. On her deathbed, Eleanor's gnarled hand gripped mine with a surprising strength. Her eyes, clouded with pain, found mine. "Clara," she whispered, her voice a dry rustle, "in my next life, I would still choose you as my daughter-in-law." Tears I didn't know I had left streamed down my face. I thought it was an acknowledgement, a final thank you that would make all the sacrifice worthwhile. Alistair held me that night, his embrace tight. "You've worked so hard, Clara. It's over now. From this moment on, I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Our life begins now." I clung to those words like a lifeline. I truly believed the suffering was over. I was a fool. Eleanor wasn't even in the ground when he handed me the papers. We were in our study, surrounded by the books he loved more than me, the degrees I had helped him earn. He wasn't alone. Standing beside him, her hand possessively tucked in the crook of his arm, was my childhood best friend, Isabel. "Clara," Alistair said, his voice devoid of the warmth it had held just days before. "It's time we were both honest. I've put up with this charade for 25 years. I am finally free." He looked at Isabel with a devotion I had never seen directed at me. "The only woman I have ever loved is Isabel. Sign the papers. There's nothing here for you anymore." The world tilted on its axis. The air vanished from my lungs. Isabel had the decency to look at the floor, but I saw the faint, triumphant curve of her lips. She had been there all along, my confidant, the one who constantly praised Alistair, urging me to appreciate the gem I had. All the while, she was waiting in the wings, ready to claim the prize once I had done the hard work of polishing it. I was forced out with nothing. The house, the bank accounts, the investments, all in his name. My name was nowhere. I had been his wife, not his partner. I wandered the streets in a daze, the cold rain soaking through my thin coat. The world was a blur of indifferent lights and faceless people. I didn't see the car, didn't hear the screech of tires. There was only a sudden, brutal impact, a sensation of flying, and then nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was staring at a gaudy, floral-patterned teacup. The scent of bergamot and cheap perfume filled the air. Disoriented, I blinked. Across from me, a young man with neatly combed brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses was smiling shyly. He was lean, his suit slightly too large, his eyes holding a carefully constructed sincerity. "A real hidden gem, my dear," a voice chirped to my left. I turned. It was Mrs. Albright, the town's most notorious matchmaker. She beamed at me. "Good character, filial, so respectful. Alistair Vance is a catch. Whoever marries him will be blessed for life." My heart stopped. Alistair Vance. I looked at the man across from me. Younger, yes, but it was him. The same earnest facade, the same warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. My hands trembled, clattering the delicate cup against its saucer. I looked down. In my hand was his matchmaking profile, the same one I had pored over with hopeful excitement a lifetime ago. A torrent of memories, of betrayal, of neglect, of a life wasted, flooded me. The pain of the car accident was nothing compared to this visceral, soul-deep agony. I saw it all again. His cold dismissal, Isabel's smug face, my own broken body on the rain-slicked street. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The past 25 years hadn't been a dream. They were a warning. I looked at Alistair, at his performative gentility, and I saw the pathetic, selfish core of the man he would become. I saw the chains waiting for me. Without a word, I crumpled the profile in my fist. The sound of the paper crunching was immensely satisfying. I stood up, the legs of my chair scraping loudly against the tiled floor of the tea shop. "What are you doing, Clara?" Mrs. Albright hissed, her smile faltering. I ignored her, my gaze fixed on Alistair. His smile had frozen, confusion clouding his features. "Miss Webb," he said, using my maiden name. "Is something wrong?" I tossed the crumpled ball of paper into a nearby trash can. The action felt symbolic, like discarding my own cursed future. "Sorry," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I don't think we're a good match." His smile vanished completely. He pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, a nervous habit I remembered well. "Miss Webb, have I done something to offend you? We can take our time to get to know each other. There's no need to be hasty." Mrs. Albright grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "Clara, don't be a fool. A man of his caliber? You won't find better. Don't make a rash decision you'll regret." I gently but firmly pulled my hand back, my eyes never leaving Alistair's. In my past life, this very gentlemanly facade had deceived me for decades. I had mistaken his poverty for temporary hardship, his calculated charm for noble character. "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Vance," I said, my lips curving into a faint, cold smile. "You're a good man. But I'm simply not the right woman for you." With that, I picked up my bag and turned to leave. "Clara." His voice was sharp and his hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. The contact sent a jolt of revulsion through me. I turned back and fixed him with an icy glare. He seemed to realize his mistake and loosened his grip immediately. "Miss Webb, I just feel it's such a pity," he pleaded, his voice soft again. "I promised my mother I would find a gentle, capable wife like you." "Then keep looking," I cut him off, shaking his hand off as if it were a diseased thing. "And Mr. Vance? Stop following me. It looks bad." I didn't look back. I walked out of the noisy, cloying tea shop and into the bright, early summer afternoon. The breeze brushed against my face, warm and alive with possibility. I filled my lungs with the fresh air, feeling the weight of a 25-year sentence lift from my shoulders. Good, I thought, a fierce, joyful determination blooming in my chest. There's still time. Just then my purse buzzed. I pulled out my flip phone, a relic I hadn't held in decades, and saw the name on the screen. Isabel. My best friend. My killer. I swiped to answer, my hand steady. "Clara. How did it go?" Her voice was a saccharine melody of false concern. "Mrs. Albright just called my mother in a panic. She said you walked out on Alistair Vance." "What happened?" "She said he's wonderful." I leaned against the rough bark of a sycamore tree, watching the dappled sunlight play on the pavement. I smiled, a genuine, ruthless smile. "I met him," I said. "Oh, wonderful. So what is he like?" "Just like Mrs. Albright said," I replied, my tone light. "A real hidden gem." On the other end of the line, Isabel let out an audible sigh of relief. "I knew it, Clara. You have to seize this opportunity. For us women, marrying a good man is the most important thing. Don't worry, once you marry Mr. Vance, I'll treat him like my own brother." The words were a perfect echo of my past life. A script she was following perfectly. Later, when I was exhausted from caring for Eleanor, she would be the one to comfort Alistair. While I scraped together funding for his projects, she would be the intellectual companion at his conferences. I closed my eyes, pressing down the bone-deep hatred that surged within me. "Isabel," I interrupted her gently. "If you think he's so good, then why don't I just hand this blessing over to you?" The line went silent. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, the shock warring with a sudden, greedy hope. "Clara, what are you saying?" Her voice was flustered. "We're best friends. How could I?" "Between friends, what's good should be shared, right?" I continued smoothly. "Didn't you always say you wanted to find a man who's ambitious, filial, and would be good to you? Alistair Vance fits every one of your requirements. But he was your blind date." "I already turned him down," I said, my gaze sweeping over the bustling, free world outside. "So now he's free. You must have Mrs. Albright's number, right? Hurry up. A stock with this much potential. If you miss out, you'll never get another chance." I didn't wait for her stammered response. I hung up, the plastic casing of the phone feeling like a weapon of liberation in my hand. I could already picture Isabel's face, a mask of shock barely concealing her triumphant delight. In my previous life she had used me as a stepping stone. This time I would hand him to her on a silver platter from the very start. I wanted to see, without my family's money and my relentless sacrifices paving the way, how Isabel planned to live her dream life with the man she adored. Let them have each other. I had a life to reclaim. The walk home was a symphony of rediscovery. Every crack in the pavement, every rustling leaf, every burst of laughter from a passing stranger felt vivid and precious. I was no longer a ghost haunting my own life. I was flesh and blood, with a future that was mine to shape. The weight of Alistair's betrayal and Isabel's duplicity was still a fresh wound, but it was cauterized by the fierce heat of my resolve. They would not get a second chance to destroy me. When I pushed open the familiar blue door of my childhood home, the scent of lemon polish and my mother's meatloaf wrapped around me like a warm blanket. It was a smell I hadn't realized I'd missed so desperately. "Clara? Is that you?" My mother's voice called from the living room. She was perched on the edge of the floral sofa, her hands nervously twisting in her lap. My father, ever the quiet presence, poked his head out from his study, a newspaper in his hand. My parents, Harold and Beatrice Webb, were salt-of-the-earth people. He was a foreman at the local printing press, and she was a secretary at the elementary school. They were traditional, believing a woman's ultimate happiness lay in a stable home and a good husband. In my last life, their approval of Alistair, the scholarly, respectable son-in-law, had felt like a blessing. Now I saw it for what it was, a well-intentioned but misguided push towards a gilded cage. "Well?" my mother asked, her eyes wide with anticipation. "How was it? What was he like?" Mrs. Albright called, and she was practically hysterical. I set my bag down on the hallway table, the action feeling deliberate and final. I sat down beside them, my posture straight, my voice calm. "Mom, Dad," I began, meeting their concerned gazes. "I don't like him." My mother's face fell, a wave of disappointment washing over her features. "What? Why on earth not?" Mrs. Albright said. "He's a perfect gentleman. A teacher." "He is a teacher," I agreed, my tone even. But Mrs. Albright probably didn't mention that his mother is chronically ill and needs expensive long-term medication. Or that he has a younger brother in college whose tuition he pays for. All on a small-town teacher's salary. I laid out the harsh economic reality, stripping away the veneer of filial piety, to reveal the crushing burden beneath. It wasn't that these facts were secret, but they were always presented as evidence of his noble character, not as the red flags they truly were. My mother's face shifted from disappointment to concern. "Oh, that is a heavy load for a young wife to carry." "It is," I nodded, pressing my advantage. "Besides, I don't want to get married. Not now. Maybe not for a long time." "But Clara," my mother started, her traditional fears rising to the surface. I leaned forward, my voice dropping, infused with a sincerity that came from a lifetime of regret. "Mom, Dad, I want to pick up my paintbrush again. I want to apply for graduate school at the Rosewood Academy of Fine Arts." The room went silent. That dream had been a point of contention years ago, quietly shelved when Alistair came along. My father's eyes, usually so calm, held a new light. He was a practical man, but he'd always had a secret soft spot for my art, proudly displaying my clumsy high school watercolors in his study. My mother looked pained. "Art school? Claire, is that wise? It's so uncertain." "Beatrice," my father said, his voice a low rumble. He folded his newspaper and set it aside. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw understanding there that startled me. Perhaps he saw a determination in my eyes that hadn't been there before. "If that's what you want," he said slowly, "then you should take the exam. Don't worry about the household. We'll manage." Tears stung my eyes, but they were tears of relief, not sorrow. I nodded firmly. "Thank you, Dad." The next day I went to the city's largest bookstore, a place I had loved in my youth but had neglected in my previous life. The smell of paper and ink was intoxicating. I was lost in a section on advanced color theory, my arms piled high with books, when a shadow fell over me. "Miss Webb." My blood ran cold. I didn't need to look up to know that voice. I closed the book in my hands with a soft snap and turned. Alistair Vance stood there, his expression a carefully crafted blend of hurt and resolve. "I know I'm being forward," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "But I felt I had to try one more time. I couldn't get you out of my mind." I said nothing, my face a mask of polite indifference. He gave a small, pained smile. "When I told my mother you'd refused me, she was so upset she couldn't sleep. This morning, she took a turn for the worse. She's in the hospital." Inside I snorted with cold derision. The same old play. In my past life this very trick had been the hook that snared me. My sympathy for the ailing mother, my desire to be a good person, had overridden my own instincts. I had gone to the hospital, been swarmed by his family, and been emotionally blackmailed into a relationship. I looked straight into his eyes, my gaze unwavering. "Mr. Vance, if your mother is ill, you should take her to a doctor, not seek out a stranger you met once. I'm not a physician. I can't cure her." His expression darkened instantly. A flash of the real Alistair, impatient, entitled, shone through the gentlemanly facade. He drew in a sharp breath. "Clara, I just hoped you might visit her. Just once. She's taken such a liking to you. She says you're the ideal daughter-in-law she always dreamed of. Please, just humor a sick old woman. See her for a moment." His voice trembled with a practiced emotion, his eyes growing slightly shiny. It was a masterful performance. I placed the color theory book back on the shelf. "My answer is no." "Clara Webb," he said, his voice rising, drawing glances from other shoppers. "How can you be so cold-hearted?" I stopped and met his furious gaze, my own calm and steady. "Mr. Vance, we have no relationship beyond one failed blind date. Your behavior, shouting at me in public, is harassment. Please stop." His chest heaved. "Fine. Fine. Fine," he bit out, the words laced with a venom I remembered well. His eyes were cloudy with a deep-seated resentment. "Clara Webb, I'll remember this." He turned on his heel and stalked away, his back rigid with humiliation. I watched him go, feeling not an ounce of fear, only a profound sense of liberation. I had broken the script. That night the phone rang. An unfamiliar number, but I knew who it would be. "Hello? Is this Miss Webb?" The voice was frail, wavering, layered with a thick blanket of self-pity. It was Eleanor Vance. "Speaking," I replied, my voice polite but distant. "Oh, my dear," she sighed, a sound meant to evoke maximum guilt. "I know my son isn't worthy of a fine girl like you. Our family has no luck. But I just wanted to hear your voice. To speak to you just once. My heart, it feels so tight. I fear I won't make it through the night." I held the receiver, saying nothing. I remembered this too. The constant cycle of crisis and guilt. Every time Alistair wanted something, his mother's health would miraculously fail, and I, the dutiful fool, would come running. "Clara," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I don't ask for much. Just come to the hospital. See this old woman once. Have pity on me." I drew a long, slow breath. I knew this wouldn't end unless I ended it. They were leeches, and they had latched onto my perceived softness. I had to sever the connection so completely they would never dare approach me again. "All right," I said, my voice flat. "Send me the address. I'll come tomorrow afternoon." After I hung up, I stared out my window at the dark, quiet street. My reflection in the glass showed a face that was older than its years, hardened by a knowledge no one else possessed. "All right, Alistair." "Eleanor," I thought, my gaze turning to ice. "You want to put on a performance? This time I'll be the one holding the script. And it's a tragedy, for you." The city hospital smelled of antiseptic and despair, a scent that was unnervingly familiar. As I approached the entrance to the inpatient wing, I saw her. Isabel. She was waiting for me just as I knew she would be. She wore a simple virginal white dress, her makeup understated to project an aura of pure concern. The moment our eyes met, she hurried forward, her face a perfect mask of worry. "Clara, you're here," she gushed, slipping her arm through mine with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. "Aunt Eleanor has been asking for you all morning. She hasn't touched her breakfast. She's just so sad." I gently but firmly extracted my arm. "Is that so? Then we shouldn't keep the elder waiting." A flicker of surprise and annoyance crossed her features before she reassembled her gentle expression. "Of course. This way." She led me to the room. The moment the door opened, the thick, cloying smell of medicine and old age hit me. It was a smell I had lived with for 15 years. Eleanor Vance lay propped up in the bed, looking dramatically pale and weak. Alistair was perched on a chair beside her, holding a cup of water to her lips with an air of saintly devotion. The moment Eleanor saw me, her eyes fluttered open wide and she made a show of struggling to sit up. "Clara. My dear girl, you came. Please don't exert yourself, Mrs. Vance," I said, my voice cool. I pulled up a chair and sat down, maintaining a careful, formal distance. She immediately lunged forward and grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Her tears, when they came, were instantaneous. "Such a good, kind girl. I knew you had a heart of gold. Look," she whispered, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion, "our family may be poor, but what fault can you find in my son? He's educated, he's filial, he has a bright future. Please, give him another chance." On cue, Isabel chimed in from behind me. "She's right, Claire. Alistair is a really good man. It would be such a shame if you two let this chance slip away." Alistair hung his head, the picture of a humble, misunderstood gentleman. I looked from the weeping mother to the concerned best friend to the wronged suitor. The 3 actors were in place. The stage was set. I looked directly at Eleanor, my voice slow and deliberate. "Mrs. Vance, there are many men in the world with bright futures. But I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "I don't enjoy doing charity work." The room plunged into a dead silence. Eleanor's tear-streaked face froze in mid-sob. Isabel's jaw went slack. Alistair's head snapped up, his face flushing a deep, mortified red. "What did you just say?" he seethed, his voice low and dangerous. I repeated, meeting his furious glare with icy calm, "I don't enjoy doing charity. Mr. Vance, how much do you earn each month? Is it enough to cover your mother's medicine, your brother's tuition, and the expenses of a new wife and family? My parents raised me for 20 years. They didn't invest in me so I could marry into poverty." "Clara Webb." Alistair shot to his feet, pointing a shaking finger at me. You are insulting me. You look down on me because I'm poor." "I don't look down on you. I am simply stating a financial reality that you and your mother seem intent on ignoring," I said coolly. "And besides, Mr. Vance, you've been looking in the wrong place. The one who truly sees your value, and is willing to struggle with you, it isn't me." I turned my gaze slowly, meaningfully to Isabel, who was standing frozen by the door. "Isabel," I said, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. "Haven't you always told me Alistair is a blue-chip stock? That he has impeccable character and that any woman would be blessed to have him?" I tilted my head. "Well then, I'm handing that blessing over to you. You should be thanking me." Isabel's face turned a spectacular shade of crimson. Her eyes darted frantically between me and Alistair, her carefully constructed composure shattered. The atmosphere in the room became so thick with awkwardness it was hard to breathe. At that exact moment, the door to the ward swung open. A tall, broad-shouldered figure filled the doorway. His sharp eyes scanned the tense scene, his brow furrowing slightly before his gaze finally settled on me. "Clara Webb." I froze. I knew this man. Julian Thorne. My high school classmate, though we'd traveled in entirely different orbits. He'd been the popular, charismatic scion of the city's most prominent family, while I'd been the quiet, studious art girl. We'd barely exchanged a dozen words. What was he doing here? He ignored everyone else, walking straight toward me with an air of unshakable authority. He held out a simple manila folder. "Here are the materials you asked for," he said, his voice a deep, steady baritone. "And I heard you were looking for a studio space. A friend of mine is renting one out in the Arts District. The light is perfect. If you're interested, I can introduce you." His sudden, incongruous appearance was like a thunderclap in the stifling room. Alistair stared at Julian, then at me, his eyes narrowing with suspicion and a flicker of intimidated jealousy. "Do you two know each other?" Alistair asked, his voice tight. Before I could form a response, Julian cast him a look so dismissive it was almost violent. "Is that any of your business?" Then he turned back to me, his tone softening imperceptibly. "The air in here is foul. Come on, I'll drive you home." I looked at Julian Thorne, at his confident stance and the lifeline he was so casually offering. He was right. This place, these people were toxic. I nodded. "Thank you, Julian." I stood up and walked out of that hospital room with him, not once glancing back at the 3 stunned faces I was leaving behind. Only when I was seated in the passenger seat of his sleek, expensive car did the tension begin to leach from my body. The interior was quiet, filled with the subtle, clean scent of leather and sandalwood. "Thank you," I said, breaking the silence. "I know you stepped in to help me. That folder is empty, isn't it?" Julian kept his eyes on the road, his profile sharp and focused. "It was nothing. People like that aren't worth a second of your time." I was taken aback. "You heard. My grandfather is in for observation a few rooms down," he replied evenly. It was hard to miss the drama. "That family, they're a swamp, Clara." His words struck me with the force of a physical blow. My chest tightened. "Once you've been stuck in one," he continued, his voice calm but intense, "you should know to stay far, far away." My heart hammered against my ribs. I turned to stare at him. "What do you mean? How could you know about any of that?" A wild, impossible hope surged in me. Could it be? Did he remember too? He must have sensed my shock because he smoothly pulled the car over to the curb and turned to face me. His eyes, a deep, penetrating gray, held mine. In the dim glow of the streetlights, his face was a landscape of sharp angles and soft shadows. "In my last life," he said quietly, and the world stopped spinning. "I was there. When you had the accident. I saw the car hit you. I saw you fall." His jaw tightened. "And I saw Alistair Vance and that woman Isabel standing across the street. They just watched. They did nothing." My mind went blank. The memory of that cold, final moment rushed back, but now there was a new figure in it. Him. "It was me who called the ambulance," Julian continued, his voice low. "It was me who made sure you were taken care of afterward. I handled your arrangements. So that was it. After I died, it wasn't my family, it wasn't my so-called friends. It was him. A virtual stranger." A tear escaped, tracing a hot path down my cheek. "Don't," he said, his voice rough as he handed me a tissue from the glove compartment. "Don't waste tears on them. They're not worth it." I took it, wiping my face roughly. "Thank you, Julian. Truly. Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said, restarting the car. "I just knew that wasn't the ending you were meant to have." He paused, then added, "You have a real gift. I still remember your painting, the one of the abandoned mill under a stormy sky, from the senior art show. You had so much raw talent. And then you just stopped." I caught my breath. That painting. I'd poured my teenage angst into it, thinking it was clumsy and melodramatic. I'd never imagined anyone, least of him, would remember it all these years later. A part of my heart, long frozen, began to thaw. "You want to apply to Rosewood, don't you?" he asked. "Yes. If you need anything, recommendation letters, portfolio advice, come to me. I minored in art history. I might be able to help." I looked at his sharp, focused profile, my emotions a tangled, overwhelming knot. In my past life, my universe had been so small, so confined to Alistair. I had never known that someone like Julian Thorne was watching, remembering, caring. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. This time I vowed I will not betray myself again. Julian's assistant, a brisk and efficient woman named Sarah, contacted me the next morning. By afternoon I was standing in the Arts District, a part of the city I had only ever dreamed of inhabiting. It was a collection of converted warehouses, their industrial bones softened by vibrant murals and climbing ivy. Sarah led me to a unit on the second floor of a brick building. When she unlocked the door and pushed it open, a shaft of afternoon light flooded the space and my breath caught. It was perfect. Spacious, with high ceilings and a wall of north-facing windows that offered a soft, consistent light, ideal for painting. The opposite wall was exposed red brick, and outside the window, a fire escape was tangled with wisteria. The air smelled of turpentine, dust, and potential. The rent. I began, already calculating my meager savings from my part-time library job. Sarah named a figure that was so reasonable it was almost suspicious. It was far less than a space like this should cost. I knew with a sudden warm certainty that Julian was subsidizing it. Instead of feeling patronized, I felt a surge of gratitude. He wasn't handing me a charity, he was handing me a key. "I'll take it," I said, my voice firm. I signed the lease that day. Using the nest egg I'd meticulously saved for a future that never came, the future with Alistair, I paid the first few months' rent. It felt like the most righteous expenditure of my life. I was investing in Clara Webb. The next week was a whirlwind of movement and paint. I moved my easel, my canvases, and my boxes of well-loved brushes into the studio. Holding a paintbrush again felt like shaking hands with an old, essential part of my soul I had thought long dead. The first strokes were clumsy, my technique rusty, but the joy was immediate and profound. It was a physical ache of rightness. I fell into a rhythm. I'd go home to eat and sleep, but my life was in that sun-drenched studio. I devoured the art books Julian had lent me, my mind expanding with concepts and techniques I'd forgotten. I practiced for hours, my fingers perpetually stained with color. Julian began to stop by. He never announced himself, simply letting himself in with a quiet knock. He'd bring coffee or sometimes lunch and then he'd just be there. He'd sit on the old velvet couch I'd scavenged, working on his laptop or reading, a silent, steady presence. He never offered unsolicited advice, never tried to steer my work. But when I'd hit a wall, staring frustrated at a canvas that wasn't working, he'd eventually look up. "That section," he'd say, gesturing with his chin, "it's too busy. Give the eye a place to rest. Negative space is your friend." Or, "You're being too safe with that color. Be bold. What's the worst that can happen?" His critiques were always precise, cutting directly to the heart of the problem. "Your technical skill is there, Clara," he said one evening as the sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and violet outside my window. "But you're still thinking inside a box. Break it." With his quiet guidance, I improved at a dizzying speed. The world of my art, which had once felt so small and confined, began to explode with possibility. My confidence for the Rosewood entrance exam, once a fragile seed, began to grow into a sturdy sapling. During this time, Alistair and Isabel faded into a distant, unpleasant rumor. At dinner one night, my mother, ever the source of local gossip, mentioned it. "You'll never believe it, Clara," she said, shaking her head. "That Alistair Vance you met? He's courting your friend Isabel Croft now. Mrs. Albright is furious. She says Isabel only has a vocational diploma and her family is, well, ordinary. Thinks she's not good enough for a scholar like him." I took a bite of my food, saying nothing. Let them think that. My father grunted from behind his newspaper. "Seems a fine match to me. The girl looks gentle. For a family with burdens, a gentle, obedient girl might be easier to manage." I almost smiled. Gentle and obedient. In my past life, Isabel had used that very facade to wrap Alistair around her finger, all while secretly despising the poverty and struggle she had to endure alongside him. And Alistair, realizing the door to my family's stability was firmly closed, had likely latched onto the one girl who still looked at him with starry-eyed admiration. It soothed his fragile, colossal ego. Let them have each other. They deserved the life they would build. One afternoon I was working on a portrait, trying to capture a specific, elusive quality of light, when my phone vibrated on the stool beside me. An unknown number. I answered absently, my focus still on the canvas. "Clara. It's me." Alistair's voice was heavy, laced with a weariness that sounded genuine. My hands stilled. I said nothing. Don't hang up," he rushed out. I need to tell you something. Isabel and we're getting married." "Congratulations," I said, my voice flat and devoid of any emotion. There was a long pause, as if he was waiting for an outburst, a sob, something. When it didn't come, he forced out the next words. "She's pregnant." I raised an eyebrow, lowering my brush. So that was her masterstroke. To secure her blue-chip stock, Isabel had played her ultimate card. "That makes it a double blessing then," I replied coolly. "A wedding and a child." My calm detachment seemed to infuriate him. "Is that all you have to say?" he snapped, his voice losing its weary edge. "If you hadn't been so cold, so dismissive, the one marrying me, the one carrying my child, would be you right now." A cold, hard laugh escaped me. "Alistair, we went on one blind date. But do you hear how unhinged you sound right now?" He sputtered, unable to form a coherent response. "And another thing," I continued, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet. "Don't call me again. Your marriage, your child, none of it has anything to do with me. I wish you both a long and happy life together. May you be forever entangled." I hung up and immediately blocked the number. I stood there, my hands trembling not with hurt, but with a residual boiling anger. Letting people who don't matter affect your mood is a waste of creative energy. I started. Julian was standing by the door, his work bag slung over his shoulder. I hadn't even heard him come in. How much had he heard? I muttered, setting my brush down with a clatter. He walked over and stood behind me, looking not at me but at my painting. His calm presence was a balm. "The way you've handled the reflection in her eyes is exceptional," he said, his voice steady. "You've captured a real soul there." His words, so specific and affirming, instantly dissolved the knot of frustration in my chest. He had a way of doing that, of pulling me back from the brink with a simple, honest observation. I turned to look at him and the question tumbled out before I could stop it. "Julian, why are you so good to me?" His gaze shifted from the canvas to my face. His gray eyes were deep, unreadable pools. For a long moment he was silent, and the only sound was the distant hum of city traffic. "Maybe," he said finally, his voice low, "because in you I see a regret I don't want repeated." I didn't understand, but he didn't elaborate. He simply gestured back to the portrait. "Focus on your painting, Clara. The exam isn't far off." I nodded, pushing my confusion aside. He was right. There was no room in this new life for the ghosts of the old one. I picked up my brush again, the vibrant, living colors on my palette a stark contrast to the gray memory of Alistair Vance. The graduate entrance exams arrived on a crisp, clear autumn morning. Walking into the hall, I felt a calm I hadn't known in either lifetime. This wasn't a desperate gamble. It was the culmination of months of focused, joyful work. My brushes were extensions of my will. The theories Julian had helped me refine were a second language. For 2 days I poured everything onto the paper and canvas, my mind clear, my hands steady. When I walked out after the final session, I lifted my face to the sky, feeling as if a weight I'd carried for decades had finally been lifted. No matter the result, I had done this for myself. There were no regrets. The results would take over a month. Refusing to sit idle, I began taking on freelance design work. Julian, true to his word, became an invaluable connection. He introduced me to the owner of a new high-end patisserie looking for a complete brand overhaul. I spent a week immersed in their world, sketching concepts that married classic elegance with a modern, whimsical touch. On the day of the presentation, Julian came with me. His presence in the sleek conference room was a silent anchor. The client, a sharp-eyed woman named Madame Laurent, flipped through my portfolio, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled. "This," she said, tapping the final design, a delicate Art Nouveau-inspired logo. "This is the soul of my brand. You have a remarkable eye, Mademoiselle Webb." She agreed to the collaboration on the spot and transferred a staggeringly large deposit into my account. For the first time in my life, I had earned a significant sum purely through my own skill and vision. The feeling was intoxicating. It was validation not as a wife or a caretaker but as Clara Webb, the artist. That evening, I insisted on treating Julian to dinner at a small, intimate French restaurant as a thank you. The warm glow of the candlelight flickered across his face, softening its sharp lines. "Thank you, Julian," I said, raising my glass of wine. "Truly. For everything." He clinked his glass against mine, his eyes holding mine. "You did the work, Clara. I just opened a door. You were the one who walked through it." We talked for hours. Not about the past but about art, about his work in venture capital, about our hopes for the future. I found to my surprise that we shared an uncanny resonance. With Alistair, conversation had been a one-way street. He held the floor on academia and his ambitions, while I listened and supported. There was always a chasm between his intellectual world and my domestic one. But with Julian we were equals. We debated, we challenged each other, we respected each other's minds. It was a connection I had never experienced before. After dinner we walked along the riverbank. The night air was cool, the city lights reflecting on the dark, swirling water. Felt easy, natural. Then Julian stopped and turned to me. "Clara," he said, his voice steady but softer than usual. "What are your plans? After the results come out?" "If I pass, I go back to school. If not, I focus on building my studio and my client list," I replied, curious about the intensity in his gaze. "Have you considered another possibility?" he asked. "What possibility?" He looked at me, his gray eyes serious in the moonlight. "For example, being my girlfriend." The world seemed to tilt. My breath hitched. I stood there, frozen, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I admitted to a deep fondness for him, a reliance, perhaps even the beginnings of love. But the scars of my past life were still livid. The memory of Alistair's betrayal, the crushing weight of a love that had been a lie, made me instinctively recoil from the vulnerability of a new commitment. Julian, I stammered, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. He saw the panic in my eyes. He didn't press. Instead, he sighed softly and reached out, gently brushing a stray strand of hair from my face before letting his hand rest on my head for a brief, comforting moment. "Don't be afraid," he murmured. "I'm not asking for an answer now. Take all the time you need. I'll wait." His touch was warm, the simple gesture flooding me with a sense of safety I hadn't felt in so long. Just as I was about to find my voice, a shrill, venomous cry shattered the peaceful night. "Clara Webb, you shameless homewrecker." I turned. Isabel, her body swollen with pregnancy, was storming toward us, her face contorted with rage. Behind her, Alistair trailed, his expression a dark storm of humiliation and anger. Ignoring her condition, Isabel lunged at me, her fingers curled into claws. "You couldn't have him, so you're trying to steal someone else's now? You pathetic." Julian moved instantly, stepping smoothly in front of me and catching her wrist with an effortless, firm grip. His expression was glacial. "Control yourself," he said, his voice like sharpened steel. Alistair hurried forward, grabbing Isabel's arm. "Isabel, stop this. Have you lost your mind?" She shoved him away, jabbing a finger toward me, her voice rising to a hysterical shriek. "Look at her, Alistair. We're not even married yet and she's already latched onto a richer man. She's doing this to get back at us. She can't stand to see us happy." Passers-by were staring now. I felt a cold fury settle in my bones. "Isabel, you're delusional," I said, my voice cutting through her screams. "My life has nothing to do with you or Alistair. Don't you dare talk back." She trembled, spittle flying from her lips. "If it weren't for you, would he be comparing me to you every day? Saying I'm not as smart, not as understanding, not as capable as you were? What spell did you cast on him?" I laughed, then a cold, harsh sound. "Alistair's nature is to be dissatisfied. He needs a servant, not a partner. He doesn't want a woman to cherish. He wants one to worship him. It seems you're failing at the one thing you were hired to do." Alistair's face went from red to a sickly white. "Enough. You're humiliating me," he roared, trying again to drag her away. "I'm not leaving." Isabel fought him, tears and mascara streaming down her face. She turned her wild eyes back to me. "Clara, please. I'm begging you. You have this man, you have everything. Just let Alistair go. Give him back to me." She was painting herself as the victim, casting me as the villainous other woman to an audience of strangers. Their judging glances felt like physical blows. It was Julian who spoke again, his voice projecting calm authority. "Mr. and Mrs. Vance," he said, the address a deliberate provocation. "Clara and I are in a committed relationship. If you harass or slander my fiancé again, my lawyer will be in touch. And my legal fees," he added with deadly calm, "are considerable." The word fiancé hung in the air between us, a seismic shock. Isabel and Alistair both paled, the fight draining out of them under the weight of that single word and the unspoken threat behind it. They knew with terrifying clarity that Julian had the power to obliterate them. With a final venomous glare, Alistair finally managed to drag a sobbing Isabel away. Julian turned back to me, his brow furrowed with concern. "Are you all right?" I nodded, though I was shaking. I looked up at him, the question tumbling out. "Julian, did you just say, fiancé?" His gaze held mine, unwavering. "It was a strategic term in the moment," he explained calmly. "To make them back down permanently." Then his eyes softened and his voice dropped. "But if you were to agree, it could become the truth at any time." My heart began its frantic pounding all over again. I looked down, unable to hold the intensity of his stare. "I need time." "I know," he said. "Let's get you home." The drive was quiet, the air in the car thick with unspoken words and the lingering echo of his question. The calm after the riverside confrontation was short-lived. A few days later, my quiet world imploded. It started subtly. A few nasty comments on a local community forum where I'd posted my portfolio. Then it exploded. By midday my social media feeds were flooded with notifications. The headlines were vicious, splashed across gossipy news sites. Aspiring artist dumps struggling teacher for millionaire, the shocking betrayal behind a local love story, and the most damaging one, how a gold digger destroyed her best friend's family. The articles were a masterclass in twisted narrative. I was painted as a calculating social climber who had cruelly rejected the hard-working filial Alistair Vance, only to become consumed with jealousy when he found happiness with my devoted best friend Isabel. According to the posts, I had then set out to seduce him away from her, and when that failed I'd snagged Julian Thorne out of spite. The comment sections were a sewer of misogynistic vitriol. Women like her are a plague. She didn't want him but she can't let anyone else have him. Typical. That poor pregnant girlfriend. My heart breaks for her. My hands turned to ice as I scrolled. I felt naked, exposed and violently ill. This was Isabel's doing. This was her revenge. She couldn't beat me in a fair fight, so she was trying to destroy my reputation, to poison the well before my career could even begin. I was frozen in my studio, the vibrant colors on my canvases seeming to mock me when my phone rang. It was Julian. Clara. I've seen it. His voice was a low, steady rumble devoid of panic. Don't be afraid. Don't respond to anything. Don't look at the comments. Let me handle it. Trust me. Those 2 words, trust me, spoken with such absolute conviction were a lifeline. I clung to them. Okay, I whispered, my voice trembling. For the next 48 hours the storm only worsened. The story gained traction. Someone claiming to be a colleague of Alistair's came forward, painting him as a martyred saint, a brilliant academic whose spirit was being crushed by my relentless harassment. I became a national punching bag. I barricaded myself in my studio, the walls that had once felt like a sanctuary now feeling like a prison. I was too terrified to go outside, too ashamed to even check my phone. Then on the morning of the 3rd day the tide turned with the force of a tsunami. A prominent legal blogger, known for dissecting high-profile defamation cases, published a meticulous, point-by-point evisceration of every slanderous article. He highlighted the lack of evidence, the logical fallacies and most importantly the clear legal liability for libel and emotional distress. Minutes later, Thorne Capital's legal department issued a press release. It was cold, formal and devastating. It announced the filing of multiple lawsuits against Isabel Croft, Alistair Vance, and several of the most vocal media outlets for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress and conspiracy. The release demanded not only retractions and public apologies but also sought substantial monetary damages. The internet, ever fickle, began to stir with doubt. But the killing blow was yet to come. Later that afternoon an audio file was leaked to every major news outlet. With a sinking heart I pressed play. A man's voice, slick and unfamiliar, spoke first. The articles are live just like you wanted. They're getting a lot of traction. When do I get the rest of the payment? Then Isabel's voice, clear and dripping with venom. Wait until that bitch Clara Webb is completely ruined. You'll get every penny. I'll make sure she never shows her face in this city again. There was a pause and then Alistair's hesitant voice. Isabel, isn't this going too far? Isabel's cold laugh was chilling. Too far. She humiliated you. Humiliated us. Let me be clear, Alistair Vance. This city isn't big enough for both her and me. She goes down or I do. The recording detonated across the digital landscape. The public outrage did a perfect, instantaneous 180. The mob that had cursed me now turned its fury on the true villains. The comments sections were flooded with apologies and rage directed at Isabel and Alistair. I knew it. That Isabel is pure evil. And Alistair is just as bad. He knew and he went along with it. A perfect match made in hell. Poor Clara Webb. I sat on the floor of my studio, phone in my lap, watching the world shift in real time. The vindication was overwhelming, a dizzying cocktail of relief and residual horror. The door to my studio opened. Julian stood there, silhouetted against the hallway light. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, but his gaze was clear and sharp. It's done, he said simply. I knew then that he hadn't slept. He had been orchestrating this entire defense, this brutal, precise counterattack for the past 3 days. All for me. Julian, I whispered, standing up. My legs felt weak. Thank you. The words were utterly inadequate. He shook his head, crossed the room in a few strides and pulled me into his arms. His embrace was not gentle. It was fierce, possessive, a shelter in the storm. He held me tightly, his chin resting on the top of my head. I didn't do it to hear you thank me, he murmured into my hair. I buried my face in his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of sandalwood and crisp cotton. His heart beat a strong, steady rhythm against my ear. I just couldn't stand to see you hurt again, he sighed, his voice heavy with a pain that seemed older than this single event. In my last life I watched you walk into a tragedy and I was too far away, too powerless to stop it. The feeling was unbearable. So this time I told myself if I ever got another chance, I would never let you be victimized again. His arms tightened around me. This isn't pity, Clara. And it's not just about now. I've loved you since high school. Since I saw you standing in front of your easel in that sunlit art room, completely lost in your world, your eyes full of a light I'd never seen anywhere else. I loved you even then. I went rigid in his arms, my breath catching. I couldn't process it. But back then, he continued, his voice laced with a deep regret, I was an idiot. Too proud, too convinced we were from different worlds. I thought you'd never see a reckless, loud-mouthed jock like me. So I just watched from a distance as you walked toward someone else. I went abroad, built my company, told myself it was to prove myself to my father. But really, a part of me was always trying to become someone worthy of standing next to you. And when I came back you were already married. So I buried it. Until the day I saw you lying in that street. His voice broke and the raw pain in it shattered the last of my defenses. All those years I had felt invisible, I had been seen by him. All those years I thought my dreams had been forgotten, he had been remembering them. Tears streamed down my face, hot and unchecked. I wrapped my arms around his waist, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a spinning world. Julian, I choked out, the name feeling both foreign and right on my lips. I'm willing. I'll give you a chance. And I'll give myself a chance too. I'm willing to try. To trust this. To trust you. It wasn't a grand declaration of love, but it was a promise. A promise to let the past rest and to step, however hesitantly, into a future with him. From that moment, the poison of the past finally began to lose its hold. The online firestorm surrounding Alistair and Isabel continued to rage. The university launched an ethics investigation into him, and Isabel was formally served with a lawsuit and a police summons for harassment, but their names no longer felt like shackles on my soul. They were someone else's problem now. For the first time, I was truly free to look forward without the shadow of what I had left behind looming over me. I was walking firmly toward a future I was choosing for myself, and for the first time I wasn't walking alone. The large, official envelope arrived on a Tuesday. I held it in my hands, its weight feeling monumental. My name was typed neatly on the front. Clara Webb. This was it. The culmination of a dream deferred for a lifetime. Julian stood beside me, a silent, steady presence. He didn't say anything, just waited. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. I skimmed the formal language, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then I saw the words, "We are pleased to inform you." A sob caught in my throat. I looked up at Julian, tears blurring my vision. "I'm in," I whispered. I got into rosewood. His smile was quiet, but it reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated pride. He pulled me into a hug and I buried my face in his shoulder, the crisp paper of the acceptance letter crinkling between us. It felt like a coronation, the official beginning of the life I was meant to live. Life in the studio became a different kind of bliss. It was no longer just a refuge. It was a workshop, a laboratory, a home. My canvases grew larger, my colors more confident, my themes more complex. Julian was a constant part of the landscape. He would sit on the old velvet couch, the soft scratch of his pen on paper or the quiet tap of his laptop keys a comforting soundtrack to my work. His presence was like the cedar scent that clung to him, grounding, calming, and strong. There were still nights when the ghosts of my past life would whisper to me. The memory of Alistair's cold dismissal, the sound of Isabel's shrill accusations, the feeling of utter powerlessness. But now when I turned my head, Julian was there. He would wordlessly make tea or simply sit with me in the quiet until the shadows receded. Slowly, the memories lost their sharp edges, fading into the dull ache of a lesson learned, rather than an open wound. One evening as I put the final touches on a painting, a turbulent, beautiful abstract piece about rebirth, I turned and found him watching me. It was the same look he'd described from high school. Deep, focused, full of a warmth that seemed to emanate from his very soul. "Clara," he said softly, his voice cutting through the quiet. "This time let me be the one who stands beside you. For every step." I set down my brush and walked over to him. I placed my paint-stained hand in his. My heart was steady, my path clear. "This time," I answered, my voice firm, "I won't betray myself. And I won't let happiness slip away." The world of Alistair and Isabel shrunk to a distant, irrelevant speck. I heard through the grapevine that the university had placed Alistair on unpaid administrative leave pending the outcome of his ethical review. His academic career, the thing he had valued above all else, was in ashes. Isabel, burdened with a pregnancy and a lawsuit she could never hope to win, had become a social pariah. Their great love was being tested in the crucible of consequence, and I had no doubt it was crumbling under the pressure. I felt nothing for them. Not hatred, not pity. Just a vast, profound indifference. My life was filled with color and light. My freelance work flourished, with Madame Laurent recommending me to her circle of elite clients. I was no longer just an artist. I was Clara Webb, a name that was beginning to carry weight. Julian and I settled into a rhythm that was both exhilarating and deeply comfortable. We were partners. He challenged my mind, supported my dreams, and in his arms, I found a safety that allowed me to be fully, completely myself. One Saturday he took me to a gallery opening. It was a show for a famous sculptor, and the place was thronging with the city's elite. I wore a simple emerald green dress, feeling confident and wholly in my element. Julian's hand was a warm, possessive weight on the small of my back as he guided me through the crowd. And then I saw them. They were huddled near a corner, trying to look inconspicuous and failing miserably. Alistair looked gaunt, his shoulders slumped, the confident scholar's posture gone. Isabel, heavily pregnant, clung to his arm, her face pale and pinched without its usual makeup. They looked shrunken, defeated. Their eyes met mine across the room. For a single frozen second, the noisy gallery fell silent for me. I saw the complex storm in Alistair's gaze. A deep, searing shame, a flicker of the old resentment, and a staggering, undeniable regret. Isabel's eyes held only a venomous, helpless hatred. Julian's hand tightened on my back. "We can leave," he murmured, his voice low in my ear. I didn't look away from them. I held Alistair's gaze, my own expression calm, neutral, as if looking at a mildly interesting piece of art. I felt nothing. No schadenfreude, no anger. They were simply part of the scenery. A reminder of a path not taken. Then I turned my head, looked up at Julian and smiled. A real, genuine smile that started in my soul and lit up my face. "No," I said. "I'm exactly where I want to be." I leaned into him and we turned away, moving deeper into the vibrant, living heart of the gallery, leaving the ghosts of my past to haunt their own miserable corner. Later that night, back in my studio, the moonlight streaming through the large windows, Julian stood before one of my newest paintings. It was a landscape, not of a place but of a feeling, wide, open fields under a vast, star-dusted sky, a sense of boundless freedom. "This is you," he said, his voice full of quiet awe. I came to stand beside him, our shoulders touching. "This is us," I corrected softly. He turned to me then, his gray eyes serious in the silver light. He didn't get down on one knee. There was no grand gesture. It was just Julian being utterly, completely direct. "Clara Webb," he said. "Marry me." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of intent, a promise. And this time I didn't hesitate. There was no panic, no fear. There was only a rightness that settled deep into my bones. "Yes," I said. The word was simple, but it felt like the most important one I had ever spoken. It was a vow to myself as much as to him. A vow to embrace this second chance at life, love, and art with everything I had. He kissed me then, and it felt like a seal on our future. Outside, the city slept, but inside my studio, surrounded by the evidence of my reclaimed dreams and held by the man who had loved me across lifetimes, I was finally, completely home. Part 8 will be a brief epilogue set a few years in the future, showing the full flowering of Clara's new life. Part 8, the masterpiece. 5 years later. The air in the Modern Visions gallery is a heady mix of expensive perfume champagne and the sharp, clean scent of wet paint and drying varnish. The walls, once stark white, are now alive with color and form. My colors, my forms. This is my first solo exhibition. A soft hum of conversation fills the space, punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter or a murmured, appreciative critique. I stand slightly apart, near the large arched window that overlooks the city's glittering skyline, allowing myself a single deep breath. My hands, now often stained with a rainbow of pigments I once thought I'd abandoned forever, are clasped calmly in front of my simple black dress. Nervous. A warm, familiar voice murmurs in my ear. An arm slips around my waist, pulling me back against a solid, steady chest. I lean into the embrace, a smile touching my lips without me having to turn. No, I answer, and it's the truth. Not nervous. Just present. Julian rests his chin on my shoulder. You should be. The critic from the Art Chronicle just left. He was using words like ferocious talent and a stunning debut. Madame Laurent is over by the triptych, telling anyone who will listen that she discovered you. I laugh softly, the sound swallowed by the gentle din of the crowd. I let my gaze sweep across the room, taking in the faces, collectors, curators, fellow artists, friends. My parents are beaming near the entrance, my father's arm proudly around my mother's shoulders. They never quite understood my art, but they understand this. My success, my happiness. My life is a canvas I finally have the skill to paint. I graduated from Rosewood with honors, my thesis exhibition catching the eye of the gallery owner who would later offer me this show. My studio in the Arts District is no longer a rented space. Julian bought the building for me as a wedding gift. The north light still floods the space each morning, but now it illuminates larger canvases, more ambitious projects, and the small, cozy corner we built for our daughter. Alara, named for the light, is 3. She's at home tonight with a sitter, probably demanding one more story before bed. The thought of her fierce little spirit and her laugh that sounds like bells, fills me with a warmth that eclipses any pride I feel for the art on these walls. She is my greatest creation, a testament to a love that is not about sacrifice but mutual growth. There is no shadow of my past life here. No lingering fear, no ghost of regret. The names Alistair Vance and Isabel Croft are distant echoes from another lifetime. I heard a few years back that their marriage dissolved in a bitter, quiet divorce shortly after their child was born. He lost his position at the university and now teaches remedial classes at a community college. She moved back in with her parents. The news was a brief, impersonal blip on a social media feed I rarely check. I felt a flicker of something, not pity but a profound sense of closure, as if a book I'd finished long ago had finally been pulped. "Penny for your thoughts," Julian says, turning me gently to face him. His gray eyes, which once seemed so unreadable, are now an open book to me, filled with a love that is as constant as the tides. "I was just thinking how different it all could have been," I say quietly. He brushes a thumb over my cheekbone, his touch infinitely gentle. "But it isn't. This is what is. This is what you built." He's right. This life wasn't handed to me. I clawed it back from the jaws of a terrible mistake. I chose the hard path of the art exam over the easy path of a convenient marriage. I chose to trust a man who saw my soul, not just my utility. I chose myself. A well-dressed woman approaches, her eyes alight with interest. "Ms. Webb, the texture in Resurgence is breathtaking. Could you tell me about your process?" I smile, slipping effortlessly into the role of the artist, my voice steady and confident. As I speak about layering and palette knives, I feel Julian's hand, a warm, reassuring pressure on the small of my back. He is my anchor, my partner, the man who loved me enough to wait for me to learn how to love myself. Later, when the last guest has departed and the gallery is quiet, we stand together in the center of the room. The spotlights have been dimmed, leaving the paintings as silent, powerful presences in the semi-darkness. "You did it, Clara," Julian says, his voice echoing softly in the vast space. "Everything you ever wanted." I look around at the evidence of my dream, then up at the man who helped me reclaim it. I think of our daughter, of the home we've built, of the future that stretches out before us, bright and uncharted. "Not everything," I correct him, taking his hand and lacing my fingers through his. I have so much more. We walk out into the cool night air, the city lights blurring into a beautiful abstract painting of their own. The past is a closed door, a finished sketch in a forgotten notebook. The future is a blank canvas, waiting for our next bold, brilliant stroke. And for the first time in both my lives, I am not afraid to pick up the brush. The end.